Welcome back to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You, Talk of the Town on LIU Public Radio. Well, this is the time of day where Otto whips out his handy-dandy questions, ongoing questions that he has and topics to chat about during this segment. So, Otto, what do you have for us today?
I was thinking that we have an age group here that's varied, starting with you as the youngest, me with the oldest, and a couple of people in the middle. And we've all gone through changes in our life and seen changes around us. So I was just wondering, what changes have taken place since your childhood that you noticed the most of? Like, I'll give you an example on my world, all right? The world of sports, for example, has changed dramatically. It's a huge business now, and it's still a form of entertainment, but it was a much bigger form of entertainment back when than it is now. You know, people getting paid $150 million or whatever. The numbers are outrageous. Mickey Mantle made $100,000 a year as an example. And he had a bad year and he took a pay cut. You know, so that to me is dramatic. In my judgment, the overpayment of people who do those types of things, you know, for entertainment.
And it like demotivates too. The expectations go so much higher when you think somebody is going to be making like, you know, millions and millions of dollars. And then they don't. It's like, oh.
You know, so I mean, entertainment, sports in general, is so much more of a business. It was always a business, but I mean, it was not a business like it is now. And the games are played differently, very much differently. You know, like NBA basketball is a major one. I played a fair amount of basketball, and the things that every play would have been a foul or a penalty back when I played. You know, you couldn't palm the ball. You couldn't travel. You know, you couldn't walk more than one step. You couldn't push people all over the place. You couldn't elbow somebody. These were all, you know, no-nos. You know, so the game has changed dramatically. So that to me is a major change that I've seen.
The game changed because of the money.
You
know, owners want to protect their
protect your investment,
their investments, but therein lies the problem, because I tell my students this in the sports media classes. This is a capitalist society. We've decided that that's the economic system we want. So therefore, if you are an exclusive person, you should get more money. Okay. Now, how many players are there in the NBA? How many teams are there?
Oh, I know.
There's only 300 guys.
Demand.
There's only 300 guys in the world who can do that job.
Right.
Out of 8 billion or 300 million in the United States, should they get paid more? Yes.
And draw people.
That's the way capitalism works. If the market can bear it, it will happen. I'm worried though, because I had a talk with a friend of mine who's very much into the Disney thing, and I said, you know, Disney's pricing themselves out of the average person.
Average family can't
the average
go.
family.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she happens to have a relationship with the new CEO, and she said, yeah, I've talked to him about it. I said, you know, it's terrible that this is how things are going, that the average family
That's such a good point.
has to save for years.
I've seen my friends, like what they've gone through to save up for that trip, and it's like a whole system.
So I didn't want to get into an economic discussion here, but that's where everything, you know, there's an old saying from the Nixon days and Watergate, follow the money. You follow the money, you find out where the issues are. For me, the NFL is not the NFL it was when I was a kid. You know, when they killed the quarterback. Now, if you touch the quarterback, it's a foul and sometimes a fine.
Well, because they're a valuable asset.
Exactly, because they're not players anymore. They're exactly what you just said. They're an asset of a corporation. And therein lies part of the problem.
Well, I think that ties in with what I've said. Like, I was in sales pretty much all my business life, corporate to corporate type stuff, all right? And people would go through a whole big to-do. They were going to buy this, do that, whatever. And I'd say, look, you're in sales. You're contributing income to this company, all right? They need income. And I kept telling them, I said, as long as you're good at that job, you're not going to have a problem, you know, because people, and that was the same thing about sales, frankly. You got paid according to what value you had in terms of bringing in, like in business, sports. Are you drawing a crowd? You bringing people in to the games? And then, like some people are very highly overpaid.
Absolutely.
I
mean, I tell my students that in the 70s and the 60s, college sports were more popular than professional sports.
Mm-hmm.
There were playoff games in the 70s that the Yankees played in where it wasn't a sellout.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a sellout
Right.
because but everything has changed because the game has changed, the market has changed, and now it's much more pro. Although I still love college sports, it's become more
Well, college
focused because
sports is
the
another-
marketing is better. The money
Right.
is there.
Yeah.
But you brought up something earlier, unless you want to continue with the sports metaphor, that when we're talking about food, I'm reminded of when I was a kid. Now, I grew up in the 70s, that 10 years from the time I'm 10 until the time I'm 20. And I remember going to Crest Supermarket, which was this small little supermarket in the village where I lived. But across the street was a butcher,
Right.
and across the
Right.
street was a fruit stand. And my mom would take us, and we'd go to the supermarket. She'd go to the butcher for her meat. She'd go to, and this is in the 1970s. We're not talking about
Years
the
ago,
19th
right.
century. We're
Right.
talking about 50 years ago. And in that time, I think one of my big disappointments is supermarkets. They're huge.
Yeah.
They've become, like we talked about in sports, they become this huge behemoth of.
It's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
No,
anymore.
it's not
Yeah.
an enjoyable.
No, and the quality is different. I think it's just a different.
The quality is different,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The
It's
same-
more processed, boxed
Right.
foods. When I was a kid, I have 8 siblings, so my mom would go to the supermarket, and she would buy all the 2 carts of food, and then they'd be put in boxes and put along the wall, and then 30 minutes later, some guy would show up with a truck and deliver it to us
Right.
because there was so much
Too
stuff.
much to carry.
Well,
And meanwhile, we'd go to the butcher. We'd go to the.
I grew up in Woodhaven in Queens, and on Jamaica Avenue, there was the butcher, Koffler's, the grocery store, Garibaldi's, Bill, the drugstore guy.
Bill the drugstore guy.
right.
Yeah.
I like that.
And
I like
then-
the Bill the
Yeah, we had
drugstore guy.
every
Yeah.
town
Yeah.
had their
We
own
had no
drugs.
Yeah.
supermarket at all. And the delicatessen I worked in, which ironically was named Otto's. All right? There wasn't no relationship, but there were a lot of Otto's around
Right,
back
right.
then.
But when you were growing up, did you know the name of the pharmacist behind the counter?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Dr. Rushvarg.
I was given many times
Yeah.
when my mother, in the 40s I'm talking about, would go to the store at 8, 9, 10, 12 years old with a list that my mother
Yep.
gave me
Yeah. Me
to
too.
buy
Me too.
the food in the store.
Yeah, we did it too.
And, I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah. Poor Christina grew up in a much different time.
Different time, yeah.
Well, you didn't.
First of all, my mom would never let me alone by myself. I'm 41. She still doesn't want me going anywhere.
I
by
mean, I
myself.
was 12 years old,
Yeah.
and probably maybe even younger.
Yeah.
I used to go to Abbott's Field
Yeah.
not by myself, but with some other kids my
Yes.
age
Yeah, you-
on the
buddies.
subway. It was nothing, but I understand that the world has
Yeah,
changed.
it's interesting.
you
No,
know?
but it's what
not
it's tough, yeah.
necessarily for the better.
No, and that's what I'm saying.
Some
Exactly,
places.
right.
In that
It's
way,
not right.
right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's like, that could be like a whole
But
argument
even in
itself.
your lifetime, you've seen changes.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, like, listen, the biggest change, and I talk about this all the time with my friends, is, that's why I think millennials are the best generation, but neither here nor there, because we had we had a time where we didn't have social media, right? So a large part of my growing up and the tough years when you're dealing with friend drama and boy drama, all this stuff, wasn't plastic. You didn't have
You
that
were
element.
interested in boys.
J. Lou,
Well,
hello.
That's right. Luckily, I got Jay early. But, in all seriousness, like, I could not imagine having it was hard enough, that you'd be upset, you didn't feel included. And this way, it wasn't in your face 24/7. Now, even as an adult, I see the struggles of, you look online and you see everyone's having the best time. It's the highlight reel of people's lives, unless you're
Or made up.
Unless you're like the person who also wants to be the downer reel of everyone's, lives.
right.
Right.
But you grew up like I didn't have internet growing up, and then I had internet. You didn't have social media, and you had social
Right.
media. And again, we just studied this in my class, is that in 2008, when you were probably,
Yeah, I was in college. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was in college, yeah.
this is a time where the internet was a free-for-all.
Yeah.
No one knew what to do
Yeah.
with it. There was no monetization. But within 5 or 6 years, by 2014, it's completely monetized, and they have all your information.
Yeah.
And all of us of an older generation looked at millennials and said, we like our lives private. Why are you giving them all this information? But in
Right.
the end, I now teach a class of kids who have had the internet and social media.
They were just born, right? They were born with. I couldn't imagine.
And they have a completely different view of it. They look at it as like
that's just what it is.
Yeah, but they also say, because the big thing in 2008 was predators. They were and they look at it and goes, what moron is going to give out their home phone number and their address? That's how they look at it. But
because they were born into it.
Oh, maybe I'll check this out. So there's an
It
evolution.
is. It's how,
Well, the
how
further
you relate
back
to
you
it.
go, like I can go back to, we had no TV.
Yeah.
So forget about social media.
Right.
We had a radio, which we sat around and looked at like it was a television.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
laying on the
Right.
ground, looking up at this radio, listening to the Lone Ranger, and it was like watching television.
Right, yeah.
My father, my mother, and I would be sitting there looking at the radio.
And my generation, we were the first generation to grow up with TV in the house
Right.
from the beginning of our lives.
Yeah, I didn't have that.
And
I was-
internet came along. You were born as a millennial, like my oldest kid, and you didn't have social media, but then all of a sudden it was there, and now you have a group. What's going to
What was
surprise
the-
them?
oh,
That's what scares me.
right.
What's the next thing?
Well, we just had a great
Well,
granddaughter.
AI
That's
essentially
it.
is the next
100%.
thing.
I just had another great
Oh,
granddaughter about 4 weeks ago.
congratulations.
All right.
Good for you.
Oh, we didn't
Congratulations.
know.
Yeah.
What's
and
her
we're
name?
going out to Denver, Lenora,
Oh, how pretty.
and her sister's Marlo.
Oh,
So we're
pretty.
going out to Denver, but
Nice.
I think about when she's my age,
Yeah.
what is this
What is this
planet
world?
going to be like?
Right.
Listen, I thought for sure by now I was supposed to have a flying car, and I'm kind of mad
no, I was-
that I was sold this.
Jetsons.
I grew up
Yeah,
with the
I was.
Jetsons.
Right, the
Well,
Jetsons.
and listen, the Jetsons had a comeback, because it
Oh,
was like
well,
vintage.
we
when
were the
I was-
original Jetsons.
when I was a little kid. But I really, truly believed once we got in this, 20, especially 2020 and on, I thought for sure it would have been a flying car. And I'm mad because I was hoping, for someone who doesn't
So
like
am
to
I.
drive.
I mean, when 2000 arrived, it
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
wow, this is huge.
That was a big
Well,
deal.
the world was
It's
going to
tw-
die.
Yeah.
out.
Y2K.
But now
Right.
we're 25 years later,
Wow.
a quarter of a century
Wow.
later.
That's pretty
And
crazy.
we're looking at this and saying, what has changed?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much.
So much.
It used to be technology took years to develop.
Yeah.
Decades, actually,
Yeah.
to develop. Now it takes years.
Yeah.
It only takes 4 or 5 years for something new to come out. So it's a little
Which is
scary.
spooky.
Well,
It is
like I
spooky.
wear hearing aids as an example, all right? And if you go back 100 years, people probably had the thing that they had sticking out
Yeah,
their
right,
ear, all right, the horn.
Right.
And they're not, and believe me, hearing aids are not perfect by any means
Yeah.
yet, all right?
Yeah.
But the technology advancement, I've been wearing hearing aids probably 23
Right, you
years.
could probably
all right?
have a collection of the.
Well, an
yeah,
expensive
yeah,
collection, all right,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
a museum.
Yeah.
But like now, all of a sudden, if I had them on, I would hear that there's somebody at the door at my house. all
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Is that a big deal? Well, maybe if I'm in Florida, there's not supposed to be anybody at the door
Yeah.
at
Right.
the
Right.
house, all right? I can hear without having to hold the phone to my ear. It comes
Yeah.
right into the hearing aid.
Right.
Yeah.
Point being, what Dan is saying, technology is evolving so quickly that it's like I sold technology pretty much the last 30 years of my sales life, all right? And I really had no choice, but I liked it to learn and evolve
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it, all right? But now I look around and I say, man, I said, this stuff is, moving and it's flying,
Yeah.
And
Well,
I try to learn a little bit about it, but
From the telegraph to the telephone
Yeah.
to you're looking at 100 years to
Yeah.
where AI came out of computers, and that's happened in the last 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So it's accelerating at such a high rate now. It's not scary. I kind of look forward to it, but I just hope we manage it
But I
better.
think, like anything, as we say on this show, the benefits, unfortunately come with, the
Absolutely.
negative aspects of stuff, and we talk about AI on the show because it is a tool, and that's something that we always want to say on the show. It is a wonderful tool and a guide, frankly, like preparing for the show, to have questions that I might not have thought of, and interesting things. I think it's a beneficial tool. But on the flip side, unfortunately, just yesterday I saw, it was posted on some like news source, and what people are using AI to like do straight like FaceTime. So they could be your child, right? FaceTiming you, that sounds like your child, looks like your child, you know, and it's, so like there's things like that that are, you know, are startling.
Oh, not good.
No, and I think, you know, back to this original conversation is that, you know, I feel for, you know, an older, you know, senior who this is so far out of their realm of things. You know, as Dan was saying, you know, each generation gets more accustomed to certain things, so it's not as, you know, shocking, and you're a little more savvy with stuff, you know. But I can see how that would really, I mean,
that's a great point, because like I was fortunate in many respects in that I was selling computers in 1969, all right?
That's
archaic
great.
as they were. They were computers, and I had to learn about it as they were going on.
But and that was instilled in you, you know, to this day.
Yeah, but there are people who had jobs, and I'm not knocking any job. Maybe you were a carpenter, or maybe you were a sanitation worker, or maybe you didn't have a need for technology.
Yeah.
You really didn't
Right.
in your job, all right?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, if you
Yeah.
can't use this thing, you
To
can't
put
even
basic-
go to a sporting
No,
event.
you can't do
You
anything.
can't go on a
I
train.
think about that all the
You need a
time.
train ticket
Yeah.
on here,
Yeah.
everything. Well, I can do all that, and I can take it for granted. I know a lot of people I
No,
can't.
I know.
Exactly.
And we're talking about people who are, you know, even
They're
you know,
not dumb
even
people.
and even
No.
my
No.
parents'
It's just anxiety.
generation,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I have my parents, you know, 70s. And my mom, her job was, you know, in NASA BOCES, where the computers were always in things. So my mom, you know, is very good on the computer, you know. And my dad, as you were saying, like he didn't have a use for a computer. So it was a completely foreign concept to him,
Right.
you know, a lot of times. And my dad would, and
it's actually
he's in his
scary.
and he was like, I mean, I would be like, I'd look at him sometimes like, Dad, like, are we like, let's like, you know, let's snap to. But it was so out of his way. The phone, forget it. Like it was just, he was always messing something.
Yeah, so we're talking changes in people's
Yeah.
lifetimes. The technology changes that have taken place. Driving a car
Oh my gosh.
compared to when I first learned how to drive, and you had to shift,
Stick
you know,
shift.
first,
My
second,
husband's
third.
new truck is
yeah.
so future. Like I sit in his truck, and there is a camera at every
It's like a
possible angle.
cockpit.
It's above, it's below, it's on each side, and it's showing you and it's like I was like looking at it, I was like I'd be scared to drive it. And my husband is, you know, he used to drive. He's been driving trucks his whole life, you know, so he has all this. We laugh at him, me and my brother, because he has all this technology, but Jay's still, you know, like, I don't trust it, you know, like he's, you know, Jay is still like, you know, head out the
You're
window.
right, because even at my age, even at your age, you've got people who are afraid of this technology or don't. I was very lucky, like Otto, my father was a civil engineer. We had computers in our house in the 70s.
I had
late
a
70s,
computer.
Yeah,
and
because
early
it's
80s,
before in here.
because it was thing he loved, so he
Right.
passed it on
Right.
to us. And that's why I'm comfortable with it. But I know plenty of my friends at my age who are
Right.
like,
No
who
way.
are learning the smartphone because of the reasons you said. You
have
need it to
to,
get on
right.
on an airplane. You need it to get, you know, on the trains. You need it to
do
buy just
almost
about anything.
anything.
Do almost anything.
Yeah.
But therein is the evolution, though. I mean, there was a time where we did everything on paper. There was a time where we didn't have indoor
Yeah.
plumbing. There was a time where people were afraid to put electricity in their homes because they
Yeah.
thought the
We
house
didn't
would
have
burn down.
refrigerators.
You know, from the first innovation that man
Yeah.
found, let's say fire, there's a positive side and a negative side. You know, there's the positive side, you cook food. Negative side, arson. You know, so
No, it's true though, because it's everything has,
you
know,
have to
it's
learn to
right.
manage and regulate it. And who's
Well, it comes
responsible
down,
for
a
that?
lot of it comes down to adapting to changes. You don't have to accept the fact that you like them, but you may have to adapt.
Well, that's what I admire about you, Otto, and that's something that we, you know, talked about a bazillion times on the show, and I talk about personally about you, because that is, you know, and that's people who I think of, you know, even comedians and actors, you know, that are still relevant all these years later, and it is, that's the number one thing. It's the adapting, you know, it's not just staying stuck in your, you know, ways and beliefs, and you're right, you don't have to accept it, but you are adapting, like this is the way of the world, right? And I'll never forget, you had said so many years ago, like, listen, if I want to talk to my grandkids, they operate via cell phones.
Yeah.
So I'm not, you could say, well, you know what, forget it. Then you're who's losing? You're not talking to your grandkid because you're not coming at them where they're at, you know,
Right.
and I think that that's such
Well,
an important
grandkids,
thing.
I mean, one of the areas, believe it or not, that I feel for my grandkids that they didn't have was street games.
I was that that's
what I
literally
was going to
that's
say.
'cause
I
even
love
yes.
My turn.
street
That was
games.
the
Yes.
growing
We played
up.
everything.
Yeah.
Went out, and you didn't come back till you
Yep.
had to come
Right.
back.
Look,
And there was like
your
8 or
parents
9 of us.
threw
You
us out of the
called for
house in the
people.
morning, and when the street lights came on,
You had to come
went
up.
home.
Yeah.
Right, it
But-
was just a
But I
basic-
feel like my grandchildren,
I
my
that's what I
kids
think too.
were in there because we lived in a pocket. We lived on a dead end.
Yeah.
Me
and-
too.
and
Because
all the
yeah,
kids
I was
showed
on a
up
dead
and,
end, so I had all my
played
friends. Yes.
street
Yes.
hockey.
Right.
I had a basketball
Yeah.
net.
I did too.
Yeah.
I was a goalie.
Yeah.
We played street
Yeah.
hockey.
There you go.
I have still
Yeah.
scars on my knees.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I want to play,
Yeah.
you guys.
But I feel for them that they
it's-
missed that.
Yeah.
Because it's a real, they talk about being street smart. There's a lot of
Right.
truth to that, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Because you learn
Yeah.
when you're playing
Yeah.
competitive,
Yes.
stupid games
Yes.
Yeah.
with other kids.
No, it's true.
You learn. You
Even
learn how to
just
handle
the
stuff.
basic communication of that time. Like if you
Yeah.
wanted to see your friend, you had to go knock on the door, you had to call for
Yeah.
them, you had to leave
Yeah.
it, pass a note in school somehow, but you didn't have to do this.
You had to act. You had to
And
be
you-
proactive.
But then you would be with your friends humanly.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and you could be hours and hours and hours with your friends. And it was just like, and you have the same friends that I had then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still 50, 60 years, the same friends. We
Yeah,
go right back
likewise,
to,
who are those are still alive.
yeah,
I'm still in
yes,
touch with.
Yes, but
Yeah.
if someone called you there was 6, I grew up one of 6, and one of my sisters was always on the phone. So you had to call someone, they had to be on the other line,
Yeah.
pick up, and if someone was on the phone, it was busy.
And forget it, you'd have to talk to their parents.
So my
you know?
house, the phone was always busy because my older sisters. So we went out.
I ask young people, when will you give your child a phone, a cell phone?
Yeah.
Right.
And
a
it's
big
earlier and
question.
earlier. But all I said to them was, why? He says, well, then I'll know where they are.
Oh,
I said,
That's
well,
another thing that
You
they
know,
have to
that's a
go
whole other
find.
thing. But for me,
No, but to
when I left
go
the
out.
house, my parents said, where you going? Going
Right.
to Jimmy's house. Now, my parents know Jimmy. They know
Right.
Jimmy's parents.
Can find
And
Jimmy.
if they want to find
Yeah.
me, they're going to call Jimmy's house. And
Exactly.
if I'm not there,
Yeah.
You're in trouble.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And if I was leaving Jimmy's
There's
house,
consequences.
if I was leaving Jimmy's house, I'd call my
Yeah.
parents and say, I'm going to John's house. And then they'd know.
Right.
Or I'd go to the movies or whatever. But here's one of the things that I think some of our friends don't understand. The idea of a home phone. Okay, now I know people
Yes,
have home
I
phones.
agree with you.
The telephone company no longer has home phone service. It's IP service. So if you're having a home phone because in a blackout it's going to work, it's not going to work. That whole system is gone. And people say, well, it'll work if I have a problem. No, it won't.
Yeah.
A cell phone will work if you have a problem because cell phones are all hooked to
As long as you can
generators.
keep it charged.
As long as you can keep it charged. And because cell phone towers have generators now, so that should work. But a home phone, I'm like, you still have a home phone? Yeah, because in a blackout it'll work. I said, no, it's not.
The only
Yeah.
reason
Not
I have
gonna
a
work.
home phone is because
See,
it
okay.
costs
The package
more.
Well, that's the other thing.
I was
yeah.
going to say that's
Yeah.
literally why I have
That's
a
the
home phone.
only reason.
And I also have a
Wow.
home phone because my favorite delivery restaurants have that number for some reason. Like I would give
Oh,
when
right,
I,
right.
like,
It just
and I
comes
can't.
up.
Yeah, I don't
could-
want to
I
ruin
could
my
argue
whole.
that you don't need that home
Yeah.
phone. You could get rid of all that service.
Well,
the
we
cable
talked about
service.
Now
this
you
by
sound like
using
Jay.
cable
Right,
service.
right. Do you
don't
still
need that.
remember your home phone number growing up?
541-5423.
Michigan
Okay, 486-0.
21221.
Oh, well, yes, Lincoln
I had
1,
letters.
5423.
I had IV6.
We were
0260.
Lincoln. I remember that the exchanges in Massapequa were Lincoln and Pyramid.
And we had a
PY and LI.
2-digit zip code, 21.
Did you really?
Uh-huh. 2 digits.
I don't know if I remember my
New
kid's
York,
zip code.
Manhattan
You are
was
really
zip
old, my
code.
friend.
like oh my god.
What was that, the Pony
Manhattan was
Express?
zip code 17.
That's
You know, they had all the zip codes with 2 digits.
Wow.
Wow.
But listen, Long Island had one area
Yeah,
code.
516.
Right.
516.
New York was
New York City had
212.
212,
Two
the
and
5
two.
boroughs.
Then it came 718.
Yeah.
Then out
That
here
was
you got
Queens.
the
916,
6 whatever
whatever it
out
was.
there.
Right.
Do
61.
like kids today like memorize any cell phone,
No.
like any phone number?
They don't
like,
know any phone
God
numbers.
forbid you got in trouble.
I don't
we don't want to.
memorize
We
anyone's
don't. We don't.
anymore
That's what
either.
I want to say. Like God forbid you
No, I
got
know
in
my
trouble. We don't want to
kids.
say why you would need to call someone. But like, what do you do? Like, I think about that often because I know I have like I could. I memorized like some phone. I know my mom's
I
cell
know
phone
my
number
mom, right.
because my mom's had the same number, but I couldn't tell you my brother's. And I
Right.
talk to him all the time, but he has changed his phone number so many times.
right.
But even if
You
you
know?
didn't, the kid, they don't need to. You don't need to.
Yeah.
The only number you really need to know is 911 and 988.
Right.
Those are the
Yeah.
two numbers you need to know.
Right.
And after that, nobody needs to know this
Yeah.
stuff.
Well-
And this is something, again, that people say, oh, you should know your phone number. You should know your mom's phone number. Why?
Yeah.
I have technology that'll do it for me. I just hit mom,
Yeah.
and I get called.
And you should have
Interesting.
ICE in your phone, ICE.
Yes, that's a great
That's a big
in
one.
case of emergency.
Yeah.
In case of emergency.
all right.
Now, my husband.
Now, when you use
my
the term
husband
ICE,
is
That's
ICE.
Dan.
I get a
Dan,
little nervous.
that's why I clarified why that's in her phone.
Another thing, you
Oh,
should
no.
have,
Oh, ICE. I didn't even think of that.
you
Oh,
should
my
have
God.
your 911 smart number on, so you don't,
Yeah.
that you should remember.
What do you mean a 911 smart number? What are you talking about?
That's if you register with
You have
911
to
as a
register with
smart 911, you give them all your information. Then when you call 911, you give them your code.
Oh.
And they know all about you right away. You don't have to go through the whole hoop-de-doo.
Oh,
You
I
just
didn't
say,
realize there was a code. I have to
Yeah.
double check this now.
yeah, you have to have a code.
Oh, I'm going to
Yeah.
Christina,
Now,
we learned
here's
something
another
today.
technology that I think is a major change is the GPS. I think it's a
That's-
marvelous system.
That is a
but-
wonderful.
But nobody knows how to read a map.
Right.
Me.
Nobody
I'm going
really
to
I
knows.
didn't know when I'm in
Yeah.
that other
And-
generation.
and-
I couldn't figure them out.
And there's nothing worse than someone who decides at the last second, oh, I was supposed to make that
Yeah.
turn.
I
think
Could
it's
be
causing
Dangerous.
worse driving than it did.
No,
I used
but
to
that's
drive
very
with
true.
a map on my lap.
My mom. My mom too.
I traveled all over the country.
Yep.
I had 2 file cabinets full
Filled with maps.
Yeah.
with maps of major cities.
Yeah,
All right.
my mom was the queen of the giant maps. Like she'd be driving me to my friend's house, because
And
in
they were like
Rockland,
this, that's
she
open
would
up.
pull over and she'd be like, reading this, and then and that's something that like I actually lived through, as because then it was my mom with the map, then it was MapQuest, and we're like, wow, there's
Wow.
MapQuest,
Right,
this is
right.
wild.
Well,
We'd
the
have
ma-
the printed.
Well, maps
stuff.
were the cause of some issues in cars, all right? You have a spouse or somebody sitting next to you with a map.
that's a fight.
And you're counting on them
Yeah.
to
I
tell
don't
you
have
what
to
to
be,
do.
yep.
Me
And they
either.
say,
I can't even tell Jay
read
the
the
GPS.
map.
Yeah.
read the map.
I want to be clear. I still have those arguments with my husband, and we're using like
You know
a
what you
GPS.
say? I forgot my glasses.
Yeah.
You can't say that yet. And he'll say, yeah, where?
I'm always like, he's like, what do you? I was like, oh, it says like 250 feet, as if like that means anything to anyone.
Right.
And Jay's like, why don't you tell me it's like the next street after this street? I
Well,
was-
years ago, in every gas station, you
Uh-huh.
could go in
Yeah.
and get
But my
maps.
family
Or go to
vacations, we
AAA
used to do that
and
all
get
the time.
the whole
Yeah.
trip laid
Yeah.
out on a map.
Right.
Now I just buy it like as a nostalgic thing,
We
like when
all
we went to
owned
Nashville.
those Rand McNally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Triptychs.
Yeah,
And they were
of
big.
They had like-
counties
Yeah.
and-
They were like books.
Yeah.
They flipped over.
But see, I wish I could read maps.
Why
like
can't you read a map?
I don't know. I'm first of all, I'm horrible at directions. Like if someone's like, Christina, what's north, what's south? You're talking a foreign language to me. I've tried, but I just can't. Like my best friend is awesome. Like she's like, this runs parallel, this runs
I
perpendicular.
used to
and
love.
I'm like,
I could sit and read a map
me.
for an hour.
No, that
really.
gives me
that's
headache.
awesome. I wish I wish I was that person.
Well, even now, like if you look at a map before you go somewhere, which you don't do anymore, you have a different
better-
picture of where you're going and what
Yeah.
you're going past.
My husband Jay does that.
Yeah.
Jay
I do
does
that
that
too.
before he needs like the full picture before just
Yeah.
to get. No,
So do I.
he's always like pulling things
Do
up on.
Google Maps
But you
to
guys,
get it. Oh,
anyway, guys, we are at the end of our show. I'd like to
Get
thank
lost here.
thank everyone for listening to Project Independence and You Talk of the Town. I'd like to thank Otto for another great topic of a conversation.
Yes.
And of course, Paula, thank you for joining us. Project Independence and You is a production of Long Island University Public Radio. Special thank you to Dan Cox. Join us again next Friday at 10 a.m. on LIU Public Radio. Goodbye and have a great weekend.